The first discipline of viral change is behavioral change, because behaviors are the currency of viral change. So anything that has to do with how to create behaviors that can spread around the organization is something that is very important. Behaviors travel through copying and imitation from other people. It's not something that you can send in PowerPoint so you can present to people, train. Even if we say we train or we teach people behaviors, we don't teach behaviors, we teach what is good or bad and what's going to happen if you don't do it. But the behavior is something that some people do and other people copy. Social copying, social imitation is fundamental in this part of behavioral change in the strategy, because that's what it is. Behaviors are the only things that are going to create change. We say there is no change unless and until there is behavioral change. You can change processes and systems and structures and everything, but it's not until people do things in a different way that you can say that you have changed. And also, you need a relatively small set of behaviors, and that's very interesting, because one of the beauties of behaviors is that they deal with many things in the organization at the same time. You don't have hundreds of behaviors to be clustered and managed to create change. Sometimes 3 or 4 or 5, which are fundamental to the life of the organization and to change, are the ones that you need. So you need to discover and cover what they are, articulate them, be very clear, and having them as a currency. When you hit behaviors, you are okay with the first discipline. That's what we call is a discipline in itself, behavioral change management. The second discipline of viral change is influence, because once you hit behaviors and you hit behaviors, you need to know what kind of influence inside the organization is going to be more powerful to spread these behaviors. Is the leadership team doing everything and everybody copying, or is other people in the organization? We know very well that the so-called peer-to-peer influence is far more powerful than hierarchical influence. The type of influence that we're talking about in viral change is influence that can scale, is a scalable influence. If you and I have a conversation or I have a coaching session with my coach, obviously I'm changing the way I do things, but that's hardly scalable. It stays in the borders of myself or the team. We're talking larger scale movement here. So we need peer-to-peer influence as mechanism to spread the behaviors. And that's something that the organization needs to understand, needs to master, needs to know, and that's why it's a discipline in itself. You spread it by a group of people who are a relatively small number of people in the organization who are usually well connected, they are well trusted by the other individuals, they are well positioned, they could be anywhere in the managerial ranks. Usually it's not the management team, it's not the top leadership, are people like you and me who doing daily work, who other people are looking at us and say, well, if Peter and John goes that way, they are my peers, it's something that we all are convinced that we have to go that way. That's what you want, to find that relatively small number of individuals, highly connected, highly trusted in the organization, which the organization goes to them and say, help, could you help us to do that? Do you believe that this is the way we have to go? Could you help us with the exhibiting of these behaviors, but also with conversations with your peers about where we want to go, and beyond conversations, doing something practical and concrete, because it may be something that we need to change, we need to fix, we need to go anywhere. So you rely on this set of new leaders that the organization has, and you have just discovered, which, as I said, usually they don't sit in the managerial ranks, could be anywhere across the organization. The third discipline of viral change is informal social networks, the management of that, or the understanding and the management sometimes of that. Because most of the real stuff in organization, whether it's innovation, new ideas, they come from the informality of the networks, from the informal conversations. They don't come necessarily from the formality of teams and committees, which they have a role in the organization, but they are not the oxygen of an organization. Informal conversations are. So you need to understand where these networks are, who are there, where are. We sometimes use a metaphor which is very useful of imagine a mountain that you have a little fire here, a little fire there, a little fire there, and suddenly the mountain is on fire. That's viral change. That's a very good analogy for viral change. Well, you can say, where are the mountains? Where can we start? Where are these conversations? Who is part of that? Because you want to nurture that network, support it. You don't want to domesticate the network to say, okay, this is something, this is a conversation, but it's Wednesday afternoon, talk about that, which some people attempt to. So it's a lot of knowledge that we have these days about how networks happen in how networks work in organizations, and we use that as a third discipline. The highly connected group of people, the champions or agents, are going to be very good at telling you very soon whether the direction of the changes and the kind of behaviors that the organization wants to have, and whether they make sense, first of all, and also whether there's going to be a big problem or small, because remember, they are very close to the ground. They are peers. They are like you and me, people who are doing their own jobs, so nothing doesn't get better than them to say, that doesn't make sense, or it does make a lot of sense, about time that we go that way. So they are a very good test element in itself of what the solidity of what you want to do. And I think leadership, by and large, in my experience, pays attention very well to this group because they are the first to know whether you're going right or you are not, or you are deviating or something that some of the aspects of the changes may go very fast, and they spread very quickly through these communities. Maybe an angle or two that is people are very reluctant to get that. Well, that's a good conversation to have on why that aspect is not going in the same direction as the rest. One of the key success factors of any modern organization, and it's nothing to do with viral change, is the marriage and the working together of the formal channels and the informal channels, the formal organization and the informal organization. If the organization is completely formal and ignores the informality of social networks and the chattering and the informal conversations, this is a stiff environment that doesn't create any innovation, maybe good for the army, but not necessarily to manage a good modern organization. On the other side, obviously, you don't want to have completely informal, everything is possible and loose type of environment with no directions. Obviously, you need that. It's the balance and the marriage of both things that we need to master these days for any organization to succeed. And obvious as it seems, historically we've been very good at the traditional formal organization. We create new teams, new committees, new things all the time, which is formal. Traditional management knows how to work with formality. The informality is sometimes a bit scary and say, oh my God, what's going to happen there, etc. But good, modern, agile organizations understand that both things are part of daily life, and how to master the combination of both things is one of the qualities of the modern leadership. The good leaders these days are very much able to understand that is this combination. You can't ignore one for the other because you're not going anywhere. The fourth discipline of viral change is storytelling. But storytelling is nothing new. It's been there for many years, and actually organizations have been good at integrating stories. More and more internal communications people talk about the stories, certainly more than 10 years ago. But the problem is that sometimes the kind of stories that we are capturing, that is being captured so far, they fall in, not necessarily all the time, but they fall into the category of what I call heroic stories. Something happens and it was a kind of crisis, and 5 guys got together all over the weekend and they killed themselves and they almost lost the family, and they, as a result of that, saved the company $5 million. And it comes in the front page of the newsletter and the CEO shakes hands with everybody. Great story. The effect of that kind of a story in the organization is that the majority of people switch off. Because you say, well, that's not me. I'm not going to be in a position to save $5 million. This is a kind of extraordinary situation. So extraordinary stories, they are very good for conversations, but they are not very good for changing anything because they are extraordinaries. So the stories that we are using and capturing and disseminating through viral change are the day-to-day, sometimes simple stories or something happening that as a result of that new behavior that now is part of the currency. We did that in a different way, and that we stopped doing that in that way. These people are now doing things in that way, and you want to go back to the organization saying, this is happening, we are advancing. Because one of the problems that many organizations have is a kind of lack of self-belief. They tell you, no, okay, yes, but we are too big or too small, or it's too early or too late, or we don't have the money, or when the next leadership comes, and when we merge. It's the too syndrome. Never, people don't believe that anything is happening. So you don't want to wait for the heroic story to say it has happened. You want to give the organization back almost every week something that says, this is happening actually. We fixed that. This is happening. It's new. We can do it. And suddenly, there is a sense of self-belief that goes in the right direction, which speeds up in itself as a social proof mechanism, speeds up the spread of viral change. So stories is a currency that we use quite a lot. Stories are memorable. Stories are beautiful. Nobody remembers bullet points. Nobody remembers the 10 points of the strategic plan and what you've done in a training course, and it rationally makes a lot of sense, and then by the time you go to the car park you have forgotten everything. People don't remember bullet points. People do remember stories very well. Something that's happened somewhere and people remember that. So stories travel, and quite frankly, you don't need to reinvent the concept of a story. It's been in the basis of civilization for many years, whether it's been religious stories, political, social movements. Anthropologists know that very well. The organization hasn't been very good. The company hasn't been very good at understanding the power of that. It's always been a very formal channel of, these are the facts, this is where we have to go, this is the strategic plan, or the figures, or the goals, the objectives. So it's very much top-down, rational, this is it. And the story is something that was there but haven't paid a lot of attention. Now is the time to reverse that and say, actually, you want to remember something, tell a story. And people remember stories that sometimes the CEO or somebody else is being said, and they go back as part of the new narrative. So that's why they are so important. But you have to master them. The fifth discipline of viral change is leadership, but two kinds of leadership. One is the one that the formal leadership of the organization needs to practice, which is what we call a backstage leadership, meaning that we are saying to them, look, dear leaders, top leaders, you may be not as important as you think you are at the time of spreading behaviors and new ways of doing, because there are other people who actually have far more influence than you think you have. Would you not like to support these guys without you being the ones who are up fronting? Many good leaders understand that very quickly, and they say, yes, how does it work? What do we have to do? So on one hand, you have the backstage leadership of the formal leadership, and on the other hand, the other part of the mirror, the other side, is the distributed leadership, which means that the community of champions, agents, the peer-to-peer influence are the real leaders. It's mastering the combination of both things, because you want both. That is the content and the basis of the fifth discipline. So it's not any leadership, it's the combination of these two kinds of leadership.